a lot of Jews who might have considered going to Israel ended up going to other places simply because there was very little infrastructure. Eventually, another group of immigrants came, and they were secular. And they were not interested in going to Israel for the reasons that Rabbi Moeller wanted to go, but they wanted to build up a Jewish land that would be a Jewish country. In the same way that France is a country for French people, and Germany is a country for German people, Israel would be a country for Jewish people. A secular country. And they proceeded to, with tremendous dedication, with real devotion, to make the desert bloom, to drain the swamps. And to a certain extent, I would say these people were crazy by the standards of today, because they were such idealistic socialists that they were devoted completely to it. But unlike most of their friends who devoted their devotion to socialism either in the Russian Revolution or coming to America and building the labor movement, this small group built the kibbutzim, they drained the swamps, they prepared the land. Had it stopped there, the experiment of rebuilding the land of Israel would not have gotten too far. Just like there were colonies in New Jersey, there were colonies in South Dakota that were paid for by Baron de Hirsch. Not much happened. A lot of the Jews who went to Israel in those early years ended up either dying or moving back because it was very rough. But the infrastructure was built. And then something happened in the world. World War I. World War I was a terrible, terrible time for the Jewish people. It disrupted life in Europe terribly. Villages that had been full of Jews were wiped out. Communities were scattered. The whole infrastructure of Jewish life was destroyed because of the war. And the League of Nations and the Balfour Declaration came about. The Balfour Declaration is called that because Balfour was the foreign minister of Great Britain, and during World War I, they issued this declaration saying that when the war was over, Palestine would be a home for the Jewish people, not prejudicing the rights of the other people there too. This is the first time in 2,000 years that a great world empire had said, we're going to stand up for the right of Jews to have a homeland in the land of Israel. And this how can I say it? The emotion that Jews felt in the little towns of Russia when the Balfour Declaration came is hard to describe. We take all this for granted, but we don't realize how helpless, defenseless, how weak we were as a people. And the fact that this great world empire said it. Now, they said it in the middle of a war. They said it they had ulterior motives, perhaps. But the fact is, that gave a spurt after the war, and there were a lot more people who came. And Israel was built up. And then the Holocaust came, and that brought as many as could get there. Unfortunately, that's only a small fraction. After 1945, after the Holocaust, there was a small window of opportunity. Most people take for granted that many of the nations of the world really don't like Jews. If you read what goes on in the world today, it's not popular to be pro-Israel. It's really not popular to be pro-Israel. The United States is almost an exception on the world scene. But right after the horrors of World War II, there was a small window when the nations of the world were overcome with guilt and shame and knew that they had to do something for the Jews. And it didn't happen as a gift. The Jews earned it through through a lot of the efforts of the various groups that worked for independence, each in their own way. In 1948, when the State of Israel became a country, that was the first time in 2,000 years that we've had a state where we could say every Jew is welcome to come. The world is no longer divided as it was in 1939 between countries that would not let the Jews out and countries that would not let the Jews in. Because that was the situation prior to World War II, when there were millions and millions of Jews in mortal terror, peril for their lives, and if they could have left, if they had a country that would take them, and then they couldn't leave, they couldn't get out, and if they got out, there was no place for them to go. So now we have a great experiment. The State of Israel is an infant. You can't compare the modern State of Israel to a country that's been around for a long time. You have to compare it to a country that is just being born. And many of the issues that the State of Israel grapples with today will be resolved in time, but it might not be in our lifetime. Tonight I want to talk a little bit about some of those issues. One is, what is the State of Israel? Is it a Jewish state, or is it a state of its citizens? Does Israel exist for the purpose of being an exclusively Jewish state, where non-Jews have rights, but it's a Jewish state? Or is it a state of its citizens, which means it could be a state that happens to have a majority of Jews, but if at some point it has a majority of non-Jews, so it'll still be a Jewish state. It'll still be a state of Israel. So it won't be in the same way that the United States is not a Christian country. It's a country of its citizens, even though the majority happen to be Christian. This makes a very big difference in what the State of Israel is. And this debate is far, far from being settled. The religious Jews are divided into many groups. Unfortunately, that is the nature of Jews, that we're divided into many groups. Some people believe that the State of Israel has no special divine that it's a state, it's a country that exists, and Jews live there, and therefore we have to build up Jewish life there because that's where Jews live. Other Jews believe that it's an open miracle from God, the first flowering of the redemption, that it's the footsteps of the Messiah, that there's something messianic in it, and that there's something very holy about the secular state of Israel, not about the Holy Land. Everybody agrees the land is holy. But the state of Israel, is it a holy thing? There are some who say it is, there are some who say it isn't. That debate will not be solved by arguments. Time will tell. Time will tell. We'll see what happens. There are others who say that religion is a private matter. It's a Jewish state, but you don't have to be religious to have a Jewish state. You can have a Jewish state, and what makes it Jewish? What makes it Jewish? When I was a student in Yeshiva Kerem B'Yavne many years ago, I had regards for a very prominent Israeli. In those days, when I went to Yeshiva in the 1960s, Israel was a small country. When someone heard you're going to Israel, they said, I have a cousin there, call him up, go visit him. Later I'd find out the cousin never even met those people. So I go, but I met a lot of interesting people.